I want to talk about this conversation between Kishore Mahbubani and Orville Scow. Kishore Mahbubani is a Singaporean diplomat. He served twice as the UN ambassador from Singapore from 1984 to 1989, and then again between 1998 and 2004. He was also the president of the United Nations Security Council between 2001 and 2002. Orville Scow is the director of Center on U.S.-China Relations at the Asia Society in New York. He's widely regarded as a China expert. Now, overall, I feel that Orville is the aggressive one. He kept on asking questions pretty clearly. He blamed the bad relationship between US and China on China. His points are China has changed, become more and more assertive, in particular after Xi Jinping took power, and that makes US uncomfortable. The US policy of engagement with China has failed. The two countries now are heading towards confrontation. And then the other thing is that he believes that China is getting more aggressive, both towards Taiwan and towards ASEAN countries in the South China Sea. And all these are China's fault. And he accused Xi Jinping of not engaging, has stopped engaging with the United States, which clearly he believes, is the main problem. I have to say, Kishore's answers are very interesting. Being a seasoned diplomat, you can tell that he's very skillful in his answer. His answers are extremely diplomatic, but he does get to his point. Let's have a look a few places, right? Here is when he's talking about ASEAN countries. This is what he said.
There are, at the end of the day, 660 million people living in Southeast Asia. There's about double the population of the United States of America. And this region of the world, I want to emphasize, is the most diverse region of planet Earth. Out of 660 million people, 250 million are Muslims, 150 million are Christian, 150 million are Buddhists, Mahayana Buddhists, Hinayana Buddhists, Taoists, Confucianists, Hindus, and as I told you, we have lots of communists also in Southeast Asia. If there was one region on planet Earth that should be destined for war and conflict, and the British describe it as the Balkans of Asia, that was Southeast Asia. Now, can you please ask yourself a simple question? Why have there been no major wars in Southeast Asia since 1979? That's 45 years. There is a hidden genius in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN. We know how to manage geopolitics. We know how to adjust, adapt, be flexible. We know how to maintain good ties with the United States, and we do. When President Biden invites the 10 ASEAN leaders, they come, right? And when President Xi invites the 10 ASEAN leaders, they go. And when Prime Minister Albanese of Australia invites 10 ASEAN leaders, they go. So if you want to learn, if you want to enter a world in which different cultures and civilizations want to learn how to live in peace with each other and can live in peace with each other, come to ASEAN. Come to Southeast Asia. Please don't be condescending towards this region. This region has accomplished some remarkable things that the whole world can take lessons from. And lesson number one, learn from us how to avoid wars.
He's saying here is clearly telling Orville that we here in ASEAN countries, we know what we're doing. We don't need outsiders to tell us what to do. Now, of course, he didn't say that, but he made it very clear. That's including amongst ASEAN countries themselves, but also the relationship between the ASEAN countries and China. Even the host was looking at Orville. I think everybody got his point, right? That he did say, don't be so condescending, which I find very interesting. When Orville is talking about the Xi Jinping, and here is a exchange that I find is very telling.
And I think what we see, if I may just quickly jump to the end here and then stop, is that in a certain sense, if I read this correctly, I think Xi Jinping has brought engagement to an end. sadly and tragically, both for us, for you, and for China. And I ask you why. How do you explain it? And that changes the game completely. So what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? What's the right response now that we don't have an operating system for any kind of as Hamid said, we're compassless. What's the answer? You tell me.
The reality is that China, frankly, has already emerged as a great power. I don't buy the conventional wisdom in the Anglo-Saxon media, which is, by the way, always wrong on China. In 1990, when the economists first predicted the coming collapse of the Chinese economy, in 1990, the Chinese GNP was $360 billion. A few months ago, the economists again came out with a story saying the Chinese economic growth is over. But then it had grown to 18 trillion. It had grown 50 times after 30 years of predictions of the coming collapse of China. Why do I emphasize that? China's rise is unstoppable. And it's not driven by you or by me. It's driven by 1.4 billion Chinese people. And I'm sure you read the column by Martin Wolf in the Financial Times last week, in which he said, if 1.4 billion Chinese people decide to become prosperous, nothing can stop them. And the Chinese people have this great desire to do as well as the rest of the world. And so they have China, by the way, China's economy has serious problems. Property bubble, demographic challenges, lack of investor confidence. These are all real issues. But at the end of the day, what we have learned is that if there's one set of policy makers that seem to know how to fix their problems gradually, it is China. Now, if you want me to answer your question directly, Orville, about President Xi Jinping, I want you to know that, again, I want to go back to my point of 193 countries in the world. Almost no other country in the world passes judgment on the quality of the leader that they are dealing with. They accept the fact that he is the leader and we have to deal with him. Good, bad, friendly, unfriendly. And frankly, I want to tell you this, if you don't mind, very directly. If you did a poll of 193 leaders and asked them in 2017, 2018, would you rather deal with President Xi Jinping or would you rather deal with President Donald Trump? I tell you, 193 countries would vote in favor of Xi Jinping. I'm serious. So when you emphasize that, oh, it's a leader that's the problem, it's not the problem. You have to deal with a country. And I can tell you this, since I've spoken to many people, especially in third world countries, who have dealt with President Xi, they don't share your vision of President Xi. They see him as a sane, sober, rational, predictable leader who is advancing China's interests quite effectively. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at where China was when he took power, 2014, where China is 2024, it has come a long way.
Now, from the beginning, Kinshore made this point very clear that there are 12% of the people living in the West. Outside the West, 88% of the world population, which is the vast majority. He actually made that point twice, trying to tell Orville that the rest of the world has different view than people in the United States and in the West. I'm not sure Orville get that, but I find that's a very good point that he's repeatedly saying. There is also one spot that I find particularly interesting. Here's what he said about 1989, right after the student movement, what the Bush Sr. did.
And I will remind you, after the Beijing massacre, what did President Bush do, who was at the initial, before we had an embassy, he was in Beijing representing the United States. He sent Brent Scowcroft to see Deng Xiaoping secretly. Didn't even tell Ambassador Jim Lilly that they were going. The transcript of that meeting is very telling, because what it shows us was Scowcroft really got berated by Deng Xiaoping, who actually I think is quite a hero. I don't want to malign him, but only to say that Deng saw the demonstrations as caused by the United States and was very abusive to Scowcroft, who was saying, please remember President Bush thinks of China. The China relationship is important, wants to continue it. I raise that only to say that I think the United States has gone the distance to try to find a way to do exactly what you propose, Kinshore, which is to accept, maybe not completely, but to get along, work it out, see if the future can't hold a better future, a more congruent future.
Orville's point is that the U.S. has been trying to engage with China, even in a situation that is a very difficult one after 89. But notice that how far he has to go to find that. He didn't come up with any examples lately during the Biden administration, certainly not during the Trump administration, and not even from Obama, right? That itself is very telling. The other thing got my attention is that about what happened in 1989, just briefly, I was there in Beijing, actually. I was living with my parents. I was very young, and I saw the tanks moving in through the street in front of our building. And I remember very vividly, both me and my brother, we were watching through the window, and the whole area, nobody's light was on. All the buildings were dark, extremely dark. And I believe everybody was watching through the window to see those tanks moving by. And I remember my brother counted them like over 100 or something. It was a very, very dangerous situation, very tense. For me at the time, I didn't know enough, but I was still supporting the students, and my parents were also. What happened at the time was 10 years after the Deng Xiaoping's opening and reforming policy, China made great progress. But when the country developed so fast, two things happened. One is the privatization of some of the state-owned companies caused the mass layoffs. In the meantime, the government does have corruptions going on at the time, rampant corruptions. So those two things add together got people really angry. Those are legitimate worryings and grievances from the people. When one of the popular party leader, Hu Yaobang, died, people organically started gather in the Tiananmen Square, remembering him. And then gradually more and more people came, and then there are people started talking in front of the public, criticizing the government, etc. And more people came, and etc. Then it became a protest, a kind of a movement. Like I said, that they are real grievances, but it can never last that long with that kind of a scale without the CIA helping and supporting the students from behind. It is obvious to me now, after many years after I left China, did I discover that this is what's going on. The beginning of the event was organic people was complaining and have legitimate complaints. But later, it became clear that the CIA was trying to overthrow the Chinese government. With that, you hear what Orville is saying, that Bush Sr. sent his national security advisor, Brent Scowcroft, to Beijing right after, and Deng Xiaoping was clearly angry. Well, how can you blame Deng Xiaoping, right? You're trying to overthrow the Chinese government. Who wouldn't be angry, right? And so this is confirmation of what I later find out. Notice that he didn't deny that. He just saying that Deng Xiaoping was angry, accusing the United States was behind the student movement trying to overthrow the Chinese government. He didn't say that's not true. And even saying Scowcroft was very brave, etc. Now, I give them the credit. Yes, Bush Sr. is regarded as one of the most friendly president in China. Partially it's because of this, because after what happened in 1989, U.S. Didn't sanction China, didn't do much other than just criticize China, but the U.S. is actually behind it. The other evidence you can see is all these so-called student movement. It is with them, their help, with the CIA's help, they escaped to Hong Kong and then come to the United States and get green cards, etc. These are all with the help of the U.S. government, the CIA. So it is very obvious, but this is the first time I saw it confirmed, pretty much confirmed, a U.S. scholar, right? Essentially, he confirmed that. So that I find interesting. After I watched this whole conversation, it is very clear to me that U.S. has two problems. One is U.S. does not believe China will rise peacefully, and it doesn't believe that China's rise can be mutually beneficial. And the other thing is the U.S. is extremely uncomfortable, I would say, not accepting the fact that we are moving towards a multipolar world. I think the U.S. has a very hard time to accept that. It's actually not just China, right? Russia is another one, and there are other countries emerging, BRICS countries like Brazil, India, etc. I think of this idea that more and more people are living better lives and more assertive and have more choices somehow is really making the United States extremely uncomfortable and almost like in a panic state. If you look at what Orville's his body language, I feel like he's almost like in a panicking kind of a state. I wanted to share with you some of the comments, which you can find below the video link that I will share with you in the instruction box. I'm from Malacca, Malaysia. Since 15th century, China already traded with Malacca. They never conquered us, only trade. But the West, the Portuguese, English, and Dutch came with cannons to conquer us and said we belong to them. They each stayed for years. The next one, Orville was so representative of USA, self-righteousness, egocentric, aggressive, and condescending. This was not a discussion, but a grilling session targeting Professor Mahbubani. I'm pleased to see that the professor did splendidly. As an American who grown up abroad in diplomatic circles, Orville's utter lack of tact and diplomacy was shocking. Taking him as a representative of my country from his outright aggression, his self-righteousness, indignation, even his unkept appearances, it is no wonder foreign leaders will ignore calls from our White House and State Department. I would ignore calls from unreasonable bullies as well, as other comments have stated. I am from Taiwan. My view is, can U.S. stop interfering in Taiwan and China? Leave us alone. Exactly. I can't agree with this comment more. Next one. Well, I'm Singaporean, and most older Singaporean with some wisdom will tell you otherwise. We see American as a troublemaker. We don't need a guest who only throws accusations without answering any questions, no better than any angry old man on the street, etc. Right? The next one, the last one here, it's just making fun of the hearing for TikTok, because the TikTok CEO Cho, he is a Singaporean, and so they just grilling him, trying to make connection between him and China, but so they kept on asking, are you a Singaporean? And here it says, always a great applause for Kinshore. He speaks for 88% of world population. We're so proud of Kinshore Mahbubani, not only as Singaporeans, but as a world citizen. I'm a Singaporean. I feel that China observer knows more about China than the China expert, who is full of himself as an American. Why does he avoid Kinshore's questions and instead point the same questions back to Kinshore on China? Can't answer properly, so avoided by attacking. You think most countries want to make friends with both US and China? No, they want to make friends with China as trading with China improves, etc. Okay. As a Hong Konger, I'm very happy seeing my country, China, stands up to challenge the win-loss situation initiated by US. By the way, I'm proud to be a Chinese. You get the idea, right? One thing also I find surprising is that Orville is being regarded as a China expert. It's so surprising that he still doesn't seem to quite understand China. It is stunning how few scholars in the West, United States in particular, truly understand China. That is very unfortunate for somebody like Orville asking that kind of questions, accuse China simply not true things. That is very unfortunate. For example, When he's saying that Xi Jinping stopped all engagement with the United States, he didn't mention the fact that it was after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan that truly angered China. And China repeatedly said that before Nancy Pelosi's visit, that this will hurt the two countries' relationship badly. Nancy Pelosi still went there, and Biden just let her. And after that, China cut out many areas of top relationship between the two countries for quite a while. It is resuming now, but there is still areas that there is still needs improvement, definitively. One of the things that many people talk about, the U.S. government talking about that China is now helping the United States with its war on drugs, accusing China of smuggling drugs to Mexico, and some of the ingredients go directly to the United States, etc., saying that China could do more. Well, China actually was working with the United States until Nancy Pelosi's visit. And that area, I think, is also one of the areas that has been resumed. Again, I mean, these things that Orville just doesn't mention. The other thing Orville said is the wolf warrior. Wolf warrior is a term originally come from a movie, which has nothing to do with the China-US relations. The movie is about the Chinese army trying to rescue Chinese citizen in a fictioned African country when that country broke into war. And that's what it was. It really isn't related to anything geopolitics, but that term has been adapted by the Western media, calling it China's policies now is wolf warrior. And Kinshore also pointed out that term has been overly used. The reason is they think China is more assertive. From what I see, the only difference is China is more clear about its position. So, for example, in the past, whenever China is being accused of did something wrong in Hong Kong, China's response is probably, okay, this is our domestic issue that you shouldn't get interfering. But the past few years, sometimes the foreign ministry would respond to these kind of questions, pointing out historically, Hong Kong has always been part of China, and it was taken by the British because of the Opium War. It doesn't even say it clearly, but it's kind of implying that you should mind your own business. You have done wrong historically. You really are not in a position to criticize us. But the mere fact that pointing those historical facts make BBC and other British in particular very uncomfortable. I think that's how it started there. They're the one who started calling it the wolf warrior diplomacy. Essentially, China just more open in terms of their answering to questions. They don't just take condescending lectures from the Western anymore. They're pointing out more to historical facts. And that seems like making the Western media in particular very uncomfortable. One thing I truly agree with Kinshore is around the world, actually, countries do like to have options. I think that's the one thing that the United States really need to understand. People don't like to be just to have one dominant power. Having choices is a good thing for all the countries. I think that's a very hard thing for the United States to take, fundamentally. And the last thing I just want to say, Xi Jinping is very popular in China. If anything, people just want him to even be more aggressive. That's all I have for now. Please leave me some comments to tell me how you think. And if you like my program, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.